Hi everyone, Temporal here, and for this session we are doing an Ask Temporal, and we are specifically covering the topic of how pro teams train. I think we've got someone who's really looking to use it as a model for a lower level team. I'm not sure how much you'll be able to replicate that, but maybe you can pull the ratios there, and hopefully that'll help out a little bit. So I haven't been doing coaching full time of pro teams for I think a little over a year now. So it's possible some of this stuff has changed. Wouldn't expect too much of it has changed. I mean, I do still talk to people. If something's wildly changed, I'm sure someone will be happy to tell me, "Temporal, you're wrong. We now do this in the comments." And cool. That's great. But I don't really think it's changed. So we're going to go over it, and we know our stuff pretty well here from our days in the scene. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what team training looks like. And let's sort of start with the actual scrims themselves, because those are the most obvious. So in the contenders world, what teams would generally look at is they would look at 12 blocks a week. And what that's going to be is that's going to be 12 scrim blocks, and those are 2-hour blocks each. So we've got 12 times 2, that's 24 hours of scrims in a week. Okay. What those are going to look like is you've got one team and another team. They're both at a similar level. They're not up against each other, or they don't expect they're going to be up against each other soon. Maybe they're going to be on different sides of a bracket, etc., in the next tournament, or maybe they're have something else that isolates them region-wise, but they don't have latency issues. That's fine. That's how these are going to train. 12 blocks at 2 hours each. Those end up dividing for 6 days a week, so 6 days per week, and then there's going to be one off day. Sometimes you'll lose more blocks if you have a tournament or if you have a match that in a given week you might go, okay, we're still going to have an off day. We're also going to cut one of these down, so maybe it's going to be 5 days a week. But then we're also going to have match play on a day, or maybe we'll have match play on 2 days, but we're also potentially going to have warm-ups too. And warm-up scrims will sometimes be 2 hours, but are usually 1 hour. So it might be instead of 12, you drop down to 10, but you really drop down to 10 and a half because you have a 1 hour warm-up scrim against someone, plus you have the matches themselves. So that's just sort of what the actual scrimming looks like, the practice there. When we then move on to another component of what makes up team training, and that's going to be Vod reviews. And for those, we have both the individual and the team variety. Let's start with the team variety. For the team variety, it's going to differ by team. I like doing about 2 to 3 of these per week. And what I like using these as is sort of the way to steer the team's training. You don't just want a team grinding, just like, oh, we're just gonna play something that we think's the meta, and we're just gonna play it and play it and play it and play it until we get better. You actually want them to have focused training where you're like, hey, we're specifically gonna work on this. We're specifically gonna work on our initiations. We're specifically gonna work on the time of our frontline push versus our McCree push. We're specifically gonna work on how we end up comboing our window with our high noon from different angles, where we use our window to clear them in one direction and our high noon on another. You're looking in your VOD reviews to find something that they're not doing well, or that another team is doing better, or that you can improve them on. Maybe it's going to be a combo like this, maybe it's going to be comms, maybe it's going to be initiations, and you use that sort of to set up, okay, I want to use this. I want to show how it does poorly. I want to show in the VOD review how it can be done better. And we're going to use this to direct our training, hopefully for the next couple days. Now, the reason that you can't just do 6 of these a week, or you can, but the reason you don't just do 6 of these a week is you VOD review something, and I like to VOD review stuff before the blocks for the day start. And what you're looking to do there is direct the training, but you don't get to know that what you want to work on is something you'll be able to work on. For example, say the thing that you're trying to have your team work on that you think is going to give them the most value right now, or is going to be the easiest to implement, is going to be something specific to the brawl versus brawl matchup. Maybe it's how you guys hit that initiation, since we were just talking about how you go, okay, well, we want to use our wall like this, we want to use our focus fire, and we want to do this to get their lamp, etc. So you can talk about, this is something we're specifically working on in this matchup. And then you find that there's a competing meta right now, and even though most of what's out there might be probably brawl v brawl in your region, and you'd usually get to work on this, turns out the team that you have on your schedule has decided, What they're actually working on is their pharmacy plus tracer comp, and you're now trying to play your brawl into their pharmacy plus tracer, and you don't get to work on the thing that you wanted your team to be working on, that you prepped in Vod Review. You're not going to then cancel the block, and the reality is you don't get to call your opponents ahead of time and say, hey, what are you going to be working on? Can you tell, or, what are you going to be playing so we know? Like, yes, you do have some knowledge of that as you play with teams, etc., but teams are allowed to pivot. A team could be playing Brawl one week and the next week move over to, we're going to run Echo plus Tracer, Fire plus Tracer, whatever, and that's perfectly fine, and you're not going to drop out of the block with them. You're still going to use that training time. They're allowed to try new things, experiment. That's how scrims work. You're working to make each other better, but you are using each other to get better there. You sometimes get more friendly scrims than that, where the teams have particularly established stuff and can do a little bit more in terms of communicating, controlling the blocks a little more, but that's not necessarily the norm. That could be something the teams could improve on, in fact. So that's why it becomes a case of you go, hey, we do our VOD review. We do our VOD review to give teams specifically things that we would like them to work on improving on as a team. This shouldn't so much be individual stuff like, hey, Lucio, you need to work on your wall writing, or hey, McCree, I want you to do exactly this. This should be stuff that factors into the team play for these team VOD reviews in terms of how I like to use them to steer where things are going. That's one type of VOD review that gets done. The other type of VOD review is a more serious, wait, why did we lose type thing. You don't necessarily need to do that with the team, but sometimes the team will want that, and you might end up doing it with them. Those you can do as necessary, effectively, if people don't understand why they lost. And then the third type of VOD review would be more of a, hey, let's get into, we're really struggling on this map. Let's talk about how we're going to play this map going forward. And you can potentially do the map thing a little more often, but again, you'd like time to train some of these things before you overload them with new information. So again, the reason we're not looking at 7 VOD reviews on concepts that we would like our team to implement per week, or 12 per week, or whatever the case may be, is because we actually need to give them a few blocks first, because they actually need blocks where they can try to implement it. And second, because as much as you might go, okay, we think we explained it clearly, we think we've got this through, it might take retweaking how you're explaining it. It might just take the time reps to get this thing, and you need to build this in as a habit. Just like for individual players, we'd go, okay, work on this thing and focus on it for 5 games, 10 games, 30 games, whatever it is, with 5 to 15% of your brain power. Well, the team needs to do the same thing. They need to be able to do enough of it to actually habitualize, to actually work it into their autopilot, this thing that you're having them work on. If you're wanting your team to call their ults, for example, they need reps actually doing that before it sticks and before that brain power is free for you to move on to something else. If you move on to something else too quickly before it's actually stuck, you're going to have wasted the time that you spent trying to get that habit built appropriately. So some teams will do more VOD reviews than this 2 to 3 that I'm recommending a week from a team perspective, and I've worked with teams that would do that. And generally for that to work well, what has to happen is you have to have, let me back up a bit. I didn't talk about VOD review length. I really consider 45 minutes an almost absolute max for how long a VOD review can be. On the vast majority of teams, you're going to have players that are going to start to lose attention around the 30 to 45 minute mark. And if you can't fit your VOD review in 45 minutes, you haven't made it targeted enough. You haven't made in, this isn't like, I'm just going to present for 45 minutes. This 45 minutes, or preferably 30 minutes, is including room for some back and forth and room for some question. The actual topic that's being covered should be able to be covered much faster than these amounts of times. So if you didn't get questions, but you should get questions, because this should be something that your players are engaging with. If your players aren't engaging with it, you're getting a little too into Professor Overwatch. I'm going to teach my players how to play the game right. They're not there to be taught how to play the game right, like, yes, take notes like a student. They're there to learn things that they can specifically implement into their play that are related to them. Okay, so I got a little sidetracked here. We talked about length. We talked about type. Yes, if you're doing more than, say, 3 VOD reviews a week, those really do need to probably even be player led, but at the very least, they need to have high levels of player engagement where you have to have like 4 or 5, and I'm talking on a roster of 6, of your players pretty consistently, not just saying, yes, we want to hear more, yes, we do this, because they'll say that just because they think they're supposed to do more VOD reviews and that's what's going to make them better. You need 4 or 5 of them like actively speaking up, actively voicing, actively participating in the VOD review for it to make sense to do any more than that. And it does become a thing of, okay, well, you can do that. You can especially do this if you're struggling with something. If your team is really engaged and really thinking about stuff, you can potentially get away with a bit more. But for most teams, I'm really not going to strongly recommend more than 2 to 3 VOD reviews a week. And I'd have 1 to 2 of those be concept VOD reviews, and 1 of those be like okay, let's talk about a map specific type VOD review. Or maybe one of these becomes okay, why did we just get crushed here? We don't understand it type VOD review. Okay. So that brings us over to individual VOD reviews. And individual VOD reviews are sort of going to be dependent on the resources that you have available. Does your team have the resources available to VOD review with a player, with every single player 3 times a week? That could be valuable if the players are laddering enough to implement the stuff. Remember, we talked about like 2 to 3 VOD reviews for a team because the team actually has to be able to get the reps to implement the stuff. Well, players have more ability to go hop on ladder and go work on things and to learn pretty quickly because it's just them. There aren't multiple catch points. It's not, hey, maybe you taught a 6-man strategy and 3 people get it and 1 person sorts it gets it and 2 people don't. Like, these 3 people still have to sort of wait for these guys to get there before they can really implement it, before they can really move on to the next thing. You can't have them move on to the next thing. You have to get the team there for it to work. For individual stuff, you can move faster because once 1 person gets it, aha, 1 person gets it, aha, you can or not gets it, but implements it, really has really factored it into their play. That becomes, okay, they can move on. Plus, they aren't limited to 24 hours of scrims per week. They can do, there's still a limit to the number of hours in a day, but they do potentially have the ability, depending on how much they're laddering, to go, I can ladder a lot in a short period of time and potentially get multiple habits. It doesn't necessarily go, oh, I have to wait. It's not necessarily I'm going to take 4 days or 3 days to implement something. It can be, nope, I really got that over the course of a couple hours, a night, whatever the case may be. That actually does happen. So they could use more coach direction in some cases on the next thing that they should work on. So you could go, hey, we're going to have 3 a week, 4 a week for a player. Most of the time, what's going to happen, though, and with the resource levels of most contenders teams at least, it's going to be a case of, hey, we're going to do 1 to 2 VOD reviews with each individual player focused on individual things. And again, we're looking for micro things to make them better at. And when I say micro things isn't quite the right way, but we're looking to find things that, hey, we can stack habits. We can make you better one little thing at a time. We're going to change how you use your grav slightly. We're going to change how you angle here slightly, etc. And preferably, these should be things that are A, on heroes that they play for your team, but B, will help them. These should be tied back to what you're doing in the team stuff. So if you're playing Brawl, for example, you might go, okay, we're doing this. We could go work on how to do XYZ on Diva, but we actually want to cover this thing that is something that you can work on individually that will also contribute to our Brawl. That's how we want to be thinking about it. Okay, so most teams you would look to do these 1 to 2 a week, at least at the contenders level of resourcing. Some teams, just based on availability of players or based on coaches' time that's available or based on availability of competent coaches, it might slip and be like once every 2 weeks, which is unfortunate, but that happens. And it can also get a little more delicate where you're a bit careful about what you want to change with players when you do get too close to match time, so it might become a little less common as you get closer to, our tournament starts in 2 days. Don't want to touch anything when things are grooving pretty well right now, even if you have things that you're going to then go start changing on the other side of the tournament. Players and play, unfortunately, is delicate. Okay. So from there, let's see, we've covered VOD reviews, team and individual. I want to move on to laddering. There's really 2 sides to this ladder thing. So if we've got ladder, you're going to have players on one of 2 sides. You're going to have players that go, I gotta I want to stop laddering. I do a bunch of scrimming. I do 24 hours of scrimming a week or whatever the case may be. That's enough Overwatch. And I also think about the game. I also do some aim training. I also watch tape of the game. This is enough. I don't need to do more Overwatch. They are wrong. I totally get it. After you've been in wonderful, strong scrim environments where teams understand what they're doing, it is very hard to go ladder. Totally understand that. But you have to do the ladder because the ladder is the place where you get to work on your individual stuff. It is Overwatch's equivalent of weight training, cardio training that we'd have in meat sports. So they do have to do it. And you can't fully sub it out with, hey, I'm going to go do aim training. I'm going to watch tape. I'm going to think about the game. I'm going to do Vod reviews. You can do some of those things. That can be some supplemental training, but you do need to keep doing some of your ladder in order to keep relevant at the game. If you're not, you're going to get left behind. And if players are like, no, no, I'll circle back to that. So you do have to keep doing some amount of laddering. How much is going to depend on where the player's mentals are at a specific time, as well as how much time they have, because those are both real things. We don't want our ladder participation hurting our scrim performance. Like, oh, I stayed up laddering till 2 a.m. or I've been laddering for the past 6 hours and now I'm going into 2 blocks of scrims and now I'm not playing well because it's just been too much Overwatch in a row. We don't want that to happen. That definitely should not happen. So that would be too much on one side. On the other hand, we definitely can't just not ladder. So on the other side, we do have, and we just talked about that over here, hey, the person is just laddering too much, too hard, etc. Where they go, hey, they just go, more Overwatch is better, more Overwatch is better, more Overwatch is better, and that's not strictly true either. We do need to go, hey, it can't be impacting your scrims. It can't be a case of you didn't get enough sleep, you slept through scrims or matches. It can't be you've just done too much Overwatch and then you get to it. So you have to find that appropriate balance, and it is going to vary a little bit from player to player, and it's also going to vary depending on what that player's current level of motivation is and mental state is. Skipping ladder for a couple days when players aren't feeling it, that can be fine. And if a player really isn't feeling it, giving them leave to take even more than a couple days off of ladder and be like, hey, take a week off of ladder, really can't go much more than that, and see if that mentally resets them and gets them going again and gets them going, yep, I'm back in, I'm hard on Overwatch, that's great. If that doesn't work, or if they constantly don't want to ladder very much, that generally means that their motivation is gone, even if they don't think it's gone, and you're going to have a tough time having that player's improvement rate keep up with the rest of the league that they're playing in, be that Contenders or Owl, or with the rest of their team if their team is laddering harder. Because whether we like it or not, whether it's more frustrating than scrims or official matches or not, it is where they get their individual reps to improve on their hero in. You know, the team play happens there. You get some individual practice in scrims, but the ladder really is the place. That is their weight training, their cardio. You can't get rid of it. You can watch players that stopped laddering, stopped taking it seriously. They don't keep up with their team. And it's obvious. They might start out pretty good on a team, you know, in the top half, top third of the team. They finish in the bottom third of the team by the time the season is over. That's how it works when you stop laddering. On the same token, they can't be going ladder 24/7. They're not there. Okay, so as we go on here, let's talk areas for improvement. We've covered what it looks like in terms of scrim blocks. We've covered Vod review, both from a team and an individual perspective. And we've talked about laddering. And hopefully I've given a relatively good idea of what those time breakdowns for a team look like. Again, we talked about a lot of teams are looking, at least at the Contenders level, at 6 days of scrim with 2 blocks a day. We've talked about Vod reviews. We're generally looking at like 2 to 3 a week on that from a team perspective, and then 1 to 2 a week for each individual player. And then we're looking at laddering, and the answer isn't quite as much as possible because there are other things you want them to do. You want them to have a little bit more in their life, which we're about to get to, but sort of as much as their life, motivation, and balance allows for. Fill as necessary. Don't let them cut it out completely. Don't let them do it to the point at which it's detrimental. That is going to vary again, depending on the player, depending on what else they have going in their life, because Contenders players, for example, Contenders doesn't pay the bills. You have to either go, so I'm just going to do this for a set amount of time, or you potentially have to be working another part-time job. So, there's things that go on there, and you don't want to do it to the level that it gets too much in the way of your health, causes you to be sitting at the computer screen 24/7. You will be sitting at a computer screen a lot, but 24/7, because you will start to play worse as a result of that. So let's get into these areas for improvement, and I'll come back to that health stuff because I think that's definitely one of them. The first place I'll start is drills. This is going to be more controversial. What you run into in Overwatch is, you'll notice in other sports that their drills are more of a thing than they are in Overwatch. You see some drills now that the workshop codes have gotten pretty decent for individuals, but we don't get as much as we might expect for teams. If you played any sort of physical sport in when you were growing up or have done anything like that, teams doing drills that are actually team wide or mostly team wide or portions of teams as drills is a very common thing, because it's a way to get practice that you're less prone to get injury. It's a way to isolate and work on something more specific, and isolating and working on something more specific, as opposed to having to, this might be what we're trying to work on, but in a scrim, we have to touch all these things because we can't just keep playing. So, like, we're trying to work on this, but we're having to work on some of this over here, some of this over here, some of this over here, some of this over here. Like, this is what we're trying to improve on, but we still have to do all these other things in a scrim. So drills are something that would be nice. The problem that you run into with drills is, in order for drills to work, you need a resisting opponent of about the same level. And the only ways to get that are to pay for it. So you'd have to find players that are good enough to do that, and you would have to pay them to, like, be a drill team that isn't trying to get the good practice themselves, but is trying to be that resistance for you. Or you go into the or you go into the case of, we will find a real opponent that competes in the same league or a similar league to us, and we will trade time with them, where we will do some time of, hey, we want to run this on you specifically. We're going to run it specifically on you 6 times in a row, and we're going to reset the map every time. Or maybe we're not going to reset the map. Maybe we're just going to do the team fights, but we want ults to not be used, or we want these ults to be used, or whatever the case may be. You can do that, but the problem is that while they'll get some practice out of that, they're getting much less efficient practice out of being your resisting opponent while you're running the same thing on them again and again. And so you're going to have to trade time, where they're then going to get to pick something that they want to do back. And the sort of coordinating back and forth between the teams of what are these things going to be, etc., as well as the setting up of the codes in such a way of, okay, well, we want to practice this specific combo. Well, we're going to have to very quickly generate a code effectively that allows those ults to be available when the map starts. Now, it's getting better as people are getting faster and better at manipulating the codes, and it's already better in the fact that if you're trying to do something in the drill world, you can start maps much faster than you could in the old world. Before the workshop stuff, you had to just wait that start time every time you reset a map. Now we're in a situation where you fortunately do have the ability to at least cut out a couple of those minutes at the beginning, because they can ready up and have the 5-second start times, which is a nice time save. Could get better than that still as people do it, but ultimately this could be an area for improvement. Isn't there yet, because there's not enough money in the scene to justify teams to practice against in most situations. You've seen a couple teams try something like that, and then they'll do something like this. Or you've got to trade time with another team, and you've got to be very coordinated in that trading of time, because otherwise you waste a lot of time setting up, okay, now let's move to this map to do this, and everyone explain it, etc. So that's one area for improvement. The other big area for improvement is going to be logs. And what I mean by those are going to be exercise logs to start, where we need to make sure. This is easier in OWL, where your players are potentially in a place that you can see them, and you can see, okay, they're eating okay, they're getting some exercise. And when I say exercise, everyone doesn't need to be gym rats, living in the gym, lifting weights, doing cardio every single day. Doesn't have to be, okay, we're training to be absolute peak athletes. Does need some level of interacting with the physical world. I don't care if they're regularly going on walks, they're going on hikes, they're running, they're riding their bike, but they're, going swimming. I don't care what it is. This doesn't have to be like they're trying to set record times. They're going for 4-minute miles, 6-minute miles. It's okay if this is, hey, they're just doing stuff that puts them in the physical world that works up a little bit of a sweat, like hikes. Hikes aren't too bad. Like those are fine, but you need to make sure that your players are doing that. And that's a little easier in the owl world where you can see your players. In the contenders world where team houses basically aren't a thing anymore, you really need to be thinking, you really need to be setting up some sort of log to track this with your players. And it sucks. It's annoying having to track any of this stuff for players. We've all had to do this for work, for school projects, where it's like, track this thing. It's like, I already do this. I don't want to track this. It just takes extra time to track it. I know, and I totally agree in most situations, but this is one of those things where it makes such a big difference for players' consistency and for their longer term mental health while doing things like sitting and playing a video game for 4 or 5 hours in a row to be getting some of that exercise. And what you want to be able to see is when you're running a team is, okay, is the level of exercise changing? Is it, they were doing fine, now their exercise is going down, and hey, their performance is also at some point after their exercise went down taking a hit. Well, that's okay, well, maybe we can fix this here. And, if it's not, well, the exercise is going to help. And anyone who's been in good shape and then after that transitioned into maybe an office job where they're not doing as much, part of that is the aging process and it sucks. But a lot of what is going on there is they used to be in good shape. They do the office job. And over the course of that first year or so, they realize, wait, their energy levels are so much lower. They require more coffee, etc. Well, yeah, because that's different than what they were doing before. So you want to try to keep that there for the players. So that is something that I recommend. The other thing that I'd recommend is break logs. And those are going to be very similar, but when players are doing the, hey, I'm laddering for 4 hours, or I just, did 2 hours of scrimming plus Vod Review. That's like 5 hours right there almost. Okay. You're going to have breaks in the middle of that. And your teams are good these days about making sure that in the middle of a scrim, there's like a 10-minute break because they understand that. You need to make sure that in these breaks and in other breaks, your players are in fact getting up and doing something that is not just sitting at their computer. They can't hop over to their Twitter, over to Reddit, go watch a YouTube video. They can't do those things. They need to actually get up away from their computer and do something. I don't care if that's walk 6 blocks and come back. I don't care if that's do 20 push-ups. I don't care if that's like actually making food. I don't really care what it is, but they need to do something. And one of the ways to do this, and this one I'm less enthused about than the exercise log. It's less mandatory that it's tracked, but it does need to happen. Is people actually need to go, hey, get up, did something during breaks, during scrims, but also when they're just doing play sessions. It should not be was sitting in chair for 8 hours, only got up to go to the bathroom and to, grab a granola bar or whatever the case will be. No, you haven't done enough. You do need your break to interact with the world, even if it's just for 5 to 10 minutes, to let yourself work a little better. It is going to make you perform better. It is going to slow down the rate at which burnout hits you. It's a consistency thing that really does help. So those are what I have here. I hope I've answered some questions in terms of distribution of what time looks like, at least in contenders. Most of this is true for Owl as well, but what time looks like in terms of how pros use their time. Now, you guys can't all mimic this because most of you don't have the cycles, the time available to go, oh yeah, I can put in as much time as contenders players do. Most contenders players can't even do that until they get to that level, at which point they are making a sacrifice to go, I'm going to choose to make less or like no money for these 6 months, this year, etc., while I try for my dream now that I'm high enough that it's maybe reachable to try to push up to Overwatch League. So like, you guys can't work this hard. You guys can't spend this much time in most situations. I don't recommend spending this much time, but for those of you that were curious what it looks like, this is mostly what it ends up looking like. If you guys have questions, throw them up in chat now. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do like and subscribe, as that helps me out quite a bit, and I really do appreciate it. Or if you are looking to get coaching or to ask questions like this yourself, you can join my Discord in the description below, see what rates look like, see what sort of promos, events we have, all that good stuff. Okay, so question from chat. I used to do competitive drumline and marching band, and there's a lot of parallels between that and organized Overwatch as far as improving practice, etc. Absolutely. Any sort of team improvement environment where like improvement is the goal, you're working together as a team, there are going to be a lot of parallels here. And one of the places that people originally looked in Overwatch for, okay, how can we get people better at Overwatch? How can coaching happen in Overwatch? Because like at the beginning of Overwatch, people didn't necessarily know how to coach it because who's going to be the coaches? Is it people who were coaches in other sports or is it people who are good at Overwatch? Because those are kind of different skills, right? And there had to be okay, well, now what works for coaching Overwatch type thing. And especially because it's a video game, and a lot of people who are in a video game scene who maybe didn't grow up playing soccer, playing on little league teams, playing like that, weren't used to having had a coach. So they didn't understand the idea of, wait, the coach isn't just someone who, has proven that they're better than all of us. Well, why would we listen to them? Like, they didn't understand there's more to it in terms of how to actually organize a team, how to actually set, okay, this is a specific thing that we're working on, how to study it, etc. So we had that thing at the beginning, but I'm on the same page, Nordstrom. Enrique says, "Yo, Owl breakdown. I always loved these. This one was more a pro in general, and this one was more of like a how pros train. Less specifically me breaking down an Owl match, though I will certainly be doing some Owl match breakdowns now that Owl is about to be starting again as of tomorrow." As a Gold Mercy, I have no idea what you are saying, but I can't stop watching. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you are watching. I just hate playing ladder because I solo and never run into a main tank player. So my tank gotta play. So you have to play tank. You have to play Ryan, and you hate it. I totally understand. The reality is, once you think of ladder not as a place to win, but as a place to be working on your individual stuff, which is how professional players think of ladder, other than when they're going for, hey, I need to hit a new peak, I need to hit 47, I need to hit 4800, I need to hit rank 1 to get noticed a little, to make a little bit of a statement. Other than when they're doing that, pros are thinking of ladder as a place just to work on their skills. Oh, there isn't a main tank, back when you could do this without roll queue. Doesn't matter, I'm still going to play the hero that I'm working on, because I'm not playing this match to win it. I am playing this match to work specifically on my blink usage. I am playing this match specifically to work on how I am using my angles on Genji, specifically to work on what this specific flick feels like, because this flick feels a little less comfortable than my other flicks, things like that. When I was in drumline, we would break up into sectionals where snares, tenors, basses would each go practice as each group. Do Overwatch teams do something like that with different roles? Not especially. Sometimes you will see, well, sort of. Sometimes you'll see, like, okay, your supports are queuing together, or your ball and your tracer are queuing together, where they're duo queuing for their ladder time. Don't see as much of it as we might like in terms of the drill world. We're not there yet. I hope that one day we will be. Or maybe that's something that has developed more seriously since I stopped being that close to the pro scene, but I don't think so. Or sometimes you'll get like supports get together to critique each other a little bit, to Vod review each other a little bit, for example, because hey, even if one's a main support, one's a flex support, they have enough overlap in what they play, especially what they play sometimes on ladder, that they're sort of in a position to do that. But as you get more resources, you sort of need a little less of that, because you have coaches sort of helping with the reviews there. But even so, you'll have teams where if the main tank is being reviewed, all of the tank players are going to be in that review session. Or if the tank sub is being reviewed, all of the tank players are going to be in that session. So you do get a little breakdown in some teams, sure. I'm someone who's growing as a coach, but I can say that my time as a retail restaurant manager helped me learn how to build team culture. Your content helps even more. Thank you. Glad to hear it, Scott. Glad to hear it. Also, there were frequently players who could drum faster than the techs. That's what we called our coaches. However, the techs really knew how to make us better and better at getting better. Exactly. I've seen a lot of players say, I'm going to reach X rank before I go with a team. Do you think this is a smart tactic, or is it even worth bothering with a tier 3 team to get better? Well, a tier 3 team is about as good as you can get onto to start. If no one knows who you are, you're not getting onto a tier 2 team. Like, it's very rare that someone without tier 3 experience makes it to tier 2. That was part of the Ellie controversy, if any of you followed that back in the day, for example. It is very rare that someone with no tier 3 experience makes it into tier 2. But if by tier 3 you mean something different than what the word usually means in Overwatch, because tier 2 would be contenders teams, tier 1 would be owl teams, tier 3 would be those teams that think they've got a real chance of fighting into trials or contenders. So, the top 32 teams is one way that we used to define it outside of contenders. Or You might call it, it's hard to use that definition because you run into a situation, well, what are the top 32 teams? You don't know until an open division has happened, and after an open division has happened, you mix around all the players and they go make new teams. So which are the new top teams? So does it go with the players? Does it go with the teams? That has always become a little bit of a mess, but tier 3 generally refers to the best teams that you can get onto without team experience. They're the teams that are going, hey, can we win enough points to get into trials and then try to climb into contenders, etc. So uh, it's okay to go, I'm just going to work on myself and I'm going to improve, and I'm just going to go, nope, I'm going to work on myself. And then once I get to a certain level, I'm going to then look for teams. And that's totally reasonable. You probably are going to improve if you're serious about improving a little bit faster, spending all of your time laddering until you get to, say, that tier 3 level, or at least until you get to a level where people can actually fulfill their responsibilities to a meaningful degree in organized play. And that's probably somewhere in the Diamond Masters range. So yeah, if you're looking to maximize your improvement, not maximize your enjoyment, not learn, just go, I want to get up here as quick as possible, then yeah, it would probably be, don't really need to bother with organized play until either tier 3, which is going to be, tier 3 is going to be like 4,400, 4,500 these days for most of the players on the team, and you're going to have those peaks to get on those teams. Let me rephrase that. You're not going to need those peaks. You're going to be able to maintain those ratings to get onto those teams. But you could also, at like Diamond Masters, go do it. But again, if you're in Silver going, I want to do organized play, I highly recommend that. I think even players in Silver will have a blast. I am coaching a team that is a Silver 6 stack that just worked their way over to scrimming, and they're like, what? This exists? This is amazing. And yeah, it is. Okay. Okay, but like if I want to work on Diva, it would make zero sense to pair with Zarya or Sig. It's just a weird comp, and the playstyle would have to change so you lose practice. Not exactly. What are you working on Diva? Like, you can't just tell me you're working on Diva. If you tell me you're working on Diva, you are not training with enough of a purpose. I'm grinding Diva is not appropriate training. I am specifically working on my DM use, or I am specifically working better than that on eating abilities, or I am specifically working on watching Tracer for pulse bombs, because what you're working on gets narrower and narrower. And not having a Rhine will change things a little, not having a Winston will change things a little, but if you're specifically working on eating pulse bombs, I don't care that much. I can still get reasonable practice playing Zarya Diva. Or if you're specifically working on, hey, I want to go take my high ground like this, yeah, it changes a little bit. It changes a little bit by not having them, but if you're working on specific enough things, and by the time you get to these levels, you are working on specific enough things, you should not just be going, I'm just putting time into this hero, just putting time into a hero doesn't do anything. You can work on a lot of stuff. Um, Tip, if you play a lot of mouse and keyboard games or have an office job, wrist mobility. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I absolutely recommend, the giant mouse pad that helps save your wrist there. That's definitely true. Giant mouse pad, and then set your sensitivity in such a way that you actually use it. Um, you're gold and you want to scrim, go for it. Oh, how do you do that? So you can join the various discords to find teams. I think there's even a subreddit that's like looking for team or something on Reddit. I don't remember what it is. You can do that. You can join that subreddit and look for posts or make one yourself that you're looking for a team or that you're looking to build a team. Or you can just go to the discords, and a lot of the discords that have scrims, that have it looking for scrim stuff, will also have recruitment, looking for team type things, etc. And just to name a few, there's the competitive Overwatch Discord, there's the Open Division Discord. Both of those you can just join whenever. Those are fine. There is also the OW. I believe that one's invite only currently. That might be full too. But that one's more exclusive. You don't need to worry about that in gold. Yes, this week, probably this weekend, we will be doing internal scrims here. So if you guys want to do some internal scrims, that's sort of whetting your appetite for what scrims are like. Those aren't real scrims. Real scrims are going to be with a fixed team where you'll play together for a bit. These scrims will be more kickball style, do it for a day type thing. But still fun, still a way to get into it, something that's between what scrimming and what ladder feels like, and they'll be fun. Okay. Sorry, Nordstorm. Okay. I think that's going to do it. If you guys have more questions, you can throw them up now. Once again, if you guys are enjoying this type of content, please do let me know. Like, subscribe. If you are or are not liking this type of content specifically, though, this Ask Temporal type stuff, let me know that either in the comments or by joining my Discord and commenting as well, because that, I'm probably looking to do a little bit more of this, but if people say they love or hate it, I may back that off and go back to more VOD reviewing type stuff. I'm still going to be doing lots of VOD reviews, though, both individual and pro stuff. Okay. Okay. Final thing. I'm currently Diamond, and my goal is to play Contenders eventually. Do you think my goal is realistic? Is there anything I can start doing to make myself desirable for better teams? Well, your goal's not necessarily unrealistic. I don't know you. I haven't seen your play, and I haven't seen your improvement rate. But your goal for it to be realistic is going to depend on how fast you can improve. And that's going to be improving with a purpose, where you're working on specific things. You're not just going in there, like we were talking about, going, I'm going to play Diva. You're going in there going, I'm specifically going to track my own life a little better. I'm not tracking my own HP enough. I'm not realizing what my HP is while I'm battling, and I'm not reacting fast enough to get out. Like, I'm going to do a better job of tracking my own HP. You're working on more specific things. And if you're doing that, yeah, you can stack habits pretty fast. Potentially, depends on you individually, and then you can get better quick enough, and Contenders doesn't have to be out of the question. That said, Grandmasters are like 0.05% of the population, and the average Grandmaster is not nearly good enough to be in Overwatch. So you do have to be improving faster than other people are improving. But no, it's not impossible. Diamond is already the top 8%. Temporal, you going to play on your scrim? No, it won't happen. I need to be the, somewhat entertaining content creator who, just discusses or expresses my misery at watching the clown fiesta that we're going to call a play there. Okay. Thanks, guys. Temporal out.